Welcome to Booty and Baribeau. I'm Rachel Baribeau. He is Josh Booty, and we're talking about the weekend that was and the week that is to come. And why are we doing that, Josh? Mainly because the Twitter sphere exploded less than an hour ago with the news that Auburn would bench Jeremy Johnson and start Sean White. First thoughts from you on this big move just a couple of games into the season.
It's about damn time. That's my first thoughts. You got to go. This is what I think about the deal is how prepared is Sean White if they wouldn't have made the move to him earlier in the season. I can't believe after the first quarter of last week's game against LSU, because Johnson threw a couple of ill-advised passes in the first quarter and he looked the same as he had in the first couple of weeks. And why do you not put Sean White in the game? What I found out and what sources say down there in Auburn after talking to some of my buddies that are close to the program is that, Sean White's a small guy. He's not. They list him at 200 pounds. He's really 175, buck 75, a buck 80. So he's not a real physical specimen. He's got a strong arm. He's a former Under Armour All-American Game MVP. The guy can play some football. He just they didn't think he was prepared physically. So I'm thinking this guy isn't prepared to play now. If he comes out this week and shows well against Mississippi State and plays rest of the season, but I think Auburn's in a lot more trouble than just at the quarterback position. They look really bad on defense, and a lot of that is because they've been so bad on offense that their defense is down, and they're down and out right now, and they're not playing physical style of football, and they know they've got no chance on offense, and it's hard to rally your team around yourselves when you're not playing any offense, you're not scoring any points. I got no chance.
All right, Josh, I reached out to some sources as well, and what I've told about him, apparently Sean Coleman, left tackle, said he's an accurate passer, he's a good leader, he has that it factor, and Malzahn said he's our quarterback going into this game, and that's kind of telling. I'm wondering about that. We're going to get behind him. I know his teammates will also. He's a talented young guy, and we're excited of what he can do. And you mentioned the MVP of the Under Armour Bowl. He, I think, 2,679 yards, 30 touchdowns his senior year. I mean, this guy, he knows how to win, but he doesn't have the threat of running.
Yeah, that's, Gus Malzahn's offense is based around a run style of play. Nick Marshall was perfect for that offense. Sean White, he's a pro-style quarterback. He's a drop-back kind of guy. So I don't know how he fits into that mold. We're going to have to see what Gus comes up with for, a game plan for this kid, because he's more like a smaller Jake Coker. He reminds me, if he's 180 and he really is 180, he probably reminds me of a Ken Dorsey. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing of past Miami Hurricane quarterback who's a thin guy that was a drop-back pro-style kind of guy. And just got it to the right people. He reminds me of that, or a Major Applewhite. He's not a big, strong, physical quarterback, and Jeremy Johnson was, but Jeremy Johnson doesn't belong on the field because he can't make an accurate read and he can't deliver a perfect strike, and so you got to go with Sean White. There's no doubt about it.
Here's my thing, Josh. Here's where you make your money. If you're Rhett Lashley and you're Gus Malzahn, everybody is doubting you. Everybody has gone ahead and thrown the season, in the toilet. You are the premier, if not the premier, you're one of the premier offensive minds in college football, is Gus Malzahn. Rhett Lashley is your best friend. You've been called the two-headed, one person, two heads, right? They understand each other. They can finish each other's sentences. They're best friends. If any time the pressure is on, right, it's right now to see what they're able to do to be able to build some packages around this guy, set him up to be successful. So these are kind of I hate that they're in the situation, Josh, but this is like 4th and goal with 2 minutes left in the game. And what are you going to do? And it's one of the reasons I love football. Your back's against the wall. Now, how are you going to perform and lead this team into a victory against a formidable opponent in Mississippi State on Saturday?
Yeah, Mississippi State's no slouch on defense. I think Mississippi State's a good team, not a great team. I think it's a big time opponent for Auburn with the state of affairs of what's going on right now. This is not a game that Auburn wants to play with a new quarterback. I think it's going to be a very difficult test. Like you said, they've got to go back to the drawing with a different style of offense, a different style of quarterback, and they've kind of got to rally this team around them in a couple of days. It's not going to be easy. I like Mississippi State to absolutely steamroll these guys unless Sean White just plays out of his mind. And we haven't seen any of Sean White. He hasn't played any really for Auburn. It's going to be a tough. Auburn's in for a tough situation, I think. And so if they don't run, they hadn't really run the ball effectively or thrown it effectively with Jeremy Johnson. So for us to think, or for everyone to think that they're just going to show up with a new quarterback and do everything right, and then their defense play physical and they all rally around this guy, I just think it's too much to ask for this Auburn team.
Well, the other thing you mentioned is the defense, and I will say I was the first one to get caught up in the Boom talk, Coach Boom, and what he was able to do, and what a great coordinator he is. And I'm not saying he's not, but what I do know about that secondary is they have the injury to Holsey. He's got young guys back there. Trey Matthews has had injuries, problems with issues or injury, I should say, early in the season. And now you didn't have Carl Lawson on that defensive line, who is an absolute difference maker. I'm just wondering, because I heard we had somebody tweeted me and called into my show on Sirius on Sunday and said, fire Coach Boom. He doesn't know how to relate to the kids. And I thought, lady, and she said, I followed him through Texas. I know all about him. And, she was very passionate and adamant about it. But what I would say is a logical person whose objective is those aren't his kids. He's been there for a very short amount of time, and you don't come in as a defensive coordinator, Josh, and wave the magic wand. What say you about this Auburn defense?
Yeah, I think that they're not playing up to their abilities, which is on Muschamp a little bit. I think that again what happened with Muschamp at Texas and at Florida is he didn't have an offense. He's I don't know if he's a cancer to an offense or what within a program, but it's like he's playing behind the eight ball everywhere he's been the last 5 years. So it's like he has to create turnovers. He's got to do some crazy stuff on defense to even give themselves a chance. At Texas, they didn't score points. At Florida, they didn't score points. And at Auburn this year, unlike Auburn, they're not scoring points. And so Muschamp is fine. There's no problem with him. He's a great football coach. He's a great defensive coach. He relates to the kids well. He was at LSU right after I was there, and all the guys love him. They play hard for him. It's like, but when you're always behind the eight ball on defense and you're not scoring points, it becomes super incredibly tough on a defensive coordinator and a defensive unit. And so I think that's where he's at right now. Is they're not scoring any points, and then that's a reason that his defense is playing the way that they're playing is they're
gassed.
They're not getting the situations that they want to get on defense because their offense is putting them in the hole every time. Exactly.
All right, Josh. Curious about this. Former quarterback, you are at LSU. The human side of it, right? I'm trying my darndest to figure out what could have happened with Jeremy Johnson. All the promise in the world. We saw him in the half against Arkansas. He showed moxie, heart, and grit. He said the Heisman talk embarrassed him in the preseason. What could have happened? What do you think, coming from that quarterback's perspective, what's going on with him? Because I do, as a human being, I feel terrible for him. I do. I feel terrible for him because I know he's put so much pressure on himself. I know his loved ones feel terrible for him, and it's just not a good situation for the young man.
He wasn't prepared for what he had to do on offense. That is what I think. I think he wasn't prepared for the season. I don't know if his football IQ is not there. I don't know if when there's a rush in his face, he doesn't feel comfortable. I don't know. I saw him during the game. He went with a glove in the second drive, and the ball flipped out the back of his hand.
That was terrible. Terrible.
And went over there and said, "Get that dang glove off your hand. That's not. You're in your own head." He was a mental midget because of just the 2 or 3 weeks of bad plays and things progressing in the wrong direction for him. That I think he started to really think about everything too much. And once you get to that point, Well, that's a cancer. So for a quarterback not to be on top of his game, not to be confident, not to believe in the system, not to get to the right, not to get the ball into the right people's hands. I mean, I remember where there was games for me in 1999 when we were really struggling at LSU, where I felt like I had to make an unbelievable play every time, and I call it kind of like a Brett Favre syndrome. He
Yeah.
was good enough to be able to do that a lot of times, but he would create plays when they weren't there. And I think that's what Jeremy Johnson was trying to do was, hey, everybody's watching me. Everybody's talking about how bad I'm playing. I've got to do something super duper good just to get back to even. And I think that's when you go in the tank more. And I think that's what he did. He completely tanked over the last couple of weekends because he's trying to make people believe or make believers out of people, for his own case, and then also try to lead this Auburn team. And when you get out of sync with what you're trying to do as a quarterback and you don't take what they give you, it becomes really difficult for a quarterback. And then when you're down in the game, once you make a mistake or two and you're down in the game, to try to make up for that and come back and try to win a ball game, because all these ball games are huge. All these SEC games are huge for Auburn. And then you really get away from what you're supposed to do as a quarterback. And I think he really would have had to calm his nerves, communicate with his team. He didn't look like he was doing any of that on the sidelines, and the poor guy just struggled and struggled and struggled. And I hope the best for him, but I don't think he's the right choice at quarterback for Auburn right now. There's no chance.
All right, let's talk about another game that featured, different ends of the spectrum, I would say, in terms of quarterback play. Alabama opens up the game with Cooper Bateman. And Nick Saban has since said, hey, it was a strategy thing. We wanted him to do a lot of the read option. We wanted him to tuck it and run. It was certainly something that maybe Hugh Freeze had not, schemed for. That obviously did not happen. Cooper Bateman did not tuck it and run it. If anybody did that, it was Jake Coker. He said, listen, it was always our plan to play Jake Coker, but the quarterback experiment, I don't know if you would say a complete failure there at the Alabama Ole Miss game, but certainly not good for the Alabama quarterbacks. And then on the other side, we'll talk about Chad Kelly just really having that it factor in that game.
Yeah, everybody watched that game super close. For him to come out and play Bateman at the beginning, I think was a mistake. That's just my 2 cents on the deal. He did want to show a wrinkle. He did want to create a mismatch and maybe a way that the quarterback could get in there and run a few plays. But we knew that Coker was going to be the guy. Coker ended up throwing 45 passes, completing 21 out of 45. That's a horrible completion percentage. When you've got those type of running backs, that type of tight end and O.J. Howard, the receivers that Alabama's recruited over the years, and don't complete 50% of your passes, something's wrong. So I don't like, and I don't think Saban likes his quarterbacks either right now. And he's not going to say that publicly because he's got to gather this team and try to win as many ball games as he can and get back into this hunt because he believes he's got those types of players in the locker room that can win a BCS title and can get to the Final Four, but he ain't happy with his quarterbacks. I can read into the situation, when they do the press conferences after the game, and some of these press conferences he's done this week is he's not happy with it, even though he's not going to blast them because he knows that's gonna create more problems for him, and so he's going to try to skirt those issues a little bit, and he's got to play with what he's got. He can't. There's no way to develop anybody else right now. We're in the middle of the season. Yeah. He's got to go with Coker. Coker, I don't think he did a good job. A lot of people said, "Oh, he did good for what what the situation was. His back was against the wall. They had to come back from a lot of scores and turnovers, but." He created 2 turnovers himself. I think he was inaccurate at times. I'm not a huge Coker fan. He did run the ball better than I thought he would. Or I thought he was a better athlete. He was a better athlete than I thought he was. He got out there and made a couple plays with his legs, but I think he was off in the passing game. And Kiffin is going to call plays that are high percentage passes, and that offense is a high percentage passing offense. It's a balanced offense. He should complete 60-70% of his passes every game. I don't care what defense they're playing because the running backs are so good, and defenses have to honor the run game against Alabama. So I put a lot of the blame on Coker, and then of course the two two run backs that were fumbled on kickoff
Yeah.
returns. Those were two huge mistakes.
All right. I could, look, I've covered football for 10 years, covered it from the sideline, from the press box. You've played. I sense there's an unrest between Kiffin and Saban. Just my take. If you watch their body language on the sidelines, it was like two ships passing in the night. And I was watching, literally, it was like they didn't even want to, and they didn't want to look at each other at points in that game. And I know Nick Saban is hard to play for, but I just don't think they're on the same page, Josh.
I see the same thing. They're a lot alike, to be honest, in their personalities. Tough people to deal with. Not as a player. I don't think they're big time players, coaches, as far as going over there and trying to figure out things. And I think they're real standoffish. Both of them are real hard-nosed guys, and so it's very difficult for a quarterback, I think, to gain a lot of confidence in what they're doing during the course of a game or during halftime or timeouts or when there's a chance for Kiffin to go over there and talk. Saban really doesn't deal with quarterbacks. He looks you in the face and goes, "Don't make another mistake."
Yeah.
That's the kind of instruction that he gives. Manage the game. Don't give the ball to the other team. So, Saban is different in the way that he coaches offense, because he doesn't really coach offense. He just says protect the football.
Right.
And then, Kiffin's personality is a lot like Saban's. And, when Jimbo was with Saban at LSU, Jimbo Fisher, he's a pretty hard-nosed guy too, but he engaged the players at a different level, and he coached quarterbacks at a different level. I think he's a better communicator than Lane Kiffin. I think even when my brother played for Lane Kiffin at USC, he wasn't a great communicator. He was a good play caller, and I think Saban and him just have to work out some of these kinks. But Alabama's not out of this thing.
No.
They got as good as chance as anybody to get in the Final Four, and I really truly believe that. I just think they've got to run the ball better. I think that they should use some sets with Drake and Henry in the backfield at the same time, and where they can go one of two ways. I think when Henry's in the game, Drake's not in the game, or he's at wide out, and they're never in the same backfield. I think they're the two best backs on the same team in the country. How do you not use them at the same time? I don't understand.
Well, they'll be going back to the drawing board, and you and I will be at the Georgia-Alabama game in a couple of weeks, and I feel like that game is just going to tell us a lot about both teams. Georgia obviously looked great against South Carolina, and I think it's a sign of the times where Steve Spurrier is with that football program, that game didn't have more intrigue. But I certainly think that this Alabama team, and listen, you made the greatest point, and that is, don't count Alabama out. Nick Saban hates to lose. I mean, he's burning the midnight oil times 10 right now, and he's got his coaches doing the same thing. And so, hell hath no fury like Nick Saban having lost, right? So, I'm just interested very much to see that Georgia Alabama game.
I'm right with you. I think that's going to be the game of the year in the SEC, because if Georgia can knock out Alabama, it's a knockout punch opportunity for Georgia in 2 weeks. I mean, you get them at your house in Athens. You're playing great football. You brought up the South Carolina game. South Carolina's pitiful. They're as bad a defensive football team in the SEC as I've seen in a long time that is not named Vanderbilt. I mean, that's how bad they are. So it's like Spurrier's got a whole another deal going as far as what he needs to do to get back on track. They're physically, they don't even want to play the game of football, it doesn't look like to me, and Georgia just routed them. But every team that's lined up against South Carolina this year has scored points and made it look easy. So, Georgia's effort was great. They've got great balance. The quarterback played out of his mind. Grayson Lambert looked great. He made great decisions.
Coming out party
for this kid, and he needed that before this SEC slate gets really tough. But if Georgia can knock out Bama at home in 2 weeks, it's going to be world news. I mean, it's going to be ground shaking, and that's going to be fun to see how Alabama's got their back against the wall now. How tough do they play? Because they're not used to losing ball games. For them to lose 2 ball games in the first 4 or 5 of the season, that doesn't happen. So it is going to be, like you said, Saban and Kiffin, they're getting real serious right now, because they've got an awesome road ahead where they can either they can either come strong and if they don't and they lose some games, but it could get hairy in Alabama. That'd be fun to see a little bit too.
All right, so I can't let you go without talking about the other quarterback in that Ole Miss Alabama game, Chad Kelly. I love the story behind the story more than anything. And this is a guy that was dismissed from Clemson. This is a guy that got into, a videotaped altercation with cops, and he was intoxicated. It did not look good for him. And he comes to Ole Miss, and he said it was because of Hugh Freeze. He said that he and Hugh Freeze do Bible studies together, and that he credits him with really giving him, that chance, that final chance. And he knew it was his final chance there. And people have just kind of questioned him all season. And then, with the 270 spots, Josh, I mean, I had a conversation with Mark Packer of SiriusXM, and he said what most people have said. Well, it's, look at the opponent. And I said to him, some things about a quarterback, and this, can't be measured in the stat column. Some things, it's just, you can't put your finger on it, but they have it. And Chad Kelly had it. He had balls, excuse my French, in Bryant-Denny Stadium, big ones, on Saturday night in that environment.
Yeah, he was a gamer on Saturday, and for him to come out and play in his first real road test in the toughest place to play, because Alabama's always, the past 5 years, history says they're the best team in the SEC, maybe the best team in the country, and their fans, I mean, it's crazy there at Bryant-Denny, and that was a night game. Game day was there. For him to come in and play with that type of poise, he does have great players around him. Hugh Freeze calls a great game. The immaculate reception where he deflected, he threw it up. That could have gone real bad. It could have gone the other way for 6, and Alabama win that game because the tide was about to turn. We all saw it happening. Alabama was coming back. Ole Miss was on their heels on defense. And if that play goes the other way, we're not talking about Chad Kelly like we're talking about him now, and he got super lucky.
Yeah.
But for them to go in and establish what they did in the pass game, he threw for 350-plus yards in the ball game, is an awesome first test. He aced the first test.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to see what he does. Ole Miss is a great football team. They've got great defense. They don't have a ton of depth, and I think that could hurt them if they end up turning the ball over a few times and putting that defense back out on the field all the time. We saw that they wore down in the second half a little bit, but I think Chad Kelly's done a wonderful job. He reminds me a little bit of Johnny Manziel. He's got that grit. He's got that fiery spirit, that attitude, and I think that's what Hugh Freeze likes. He's just trying to cage it a little bit and make him play within his system, because Hugh knows his system is awesome, and we've all seen what Ole Miss can do on offense. I think they're gonna have a lot of good offensive games this year. I think that was a huge confidence booster for Kelly, and I think they're just going to ride that confidence into these next few weeks and the rest of the year. And I really like the way things are looking at Ole Miss.
I do too. I talked to Neil McCready on Sunday night on SiriusXM College Sports Nation, and he said, the difference was last year it was almost as if this team, Ole Miss, felt lucky to get the win, but this year, and Hugh Freeze backed this up in his post-game press conference. He said it was the shortest talk ever. It was like, guys, you're ready and you're capable. You can beat them. You're capable. You're talented. You can beat them. And they did have that charisma, that swagger going out there. Robert Kimdichie, got a chance to visit with him afterwards. He's an absolute beast. He is a once-in-a-lifetime specimen on the defensive side of the ball, and the Kimdichie genes with Denzel as well. It's really something special. But you're right. The schedule sets up for them. Their next couple of games sets up well for them. And I think, Josh, the only real opponent that Ole Miss has down the stretch is Ole Miss itself. Like, do you believe that you have what it takes to go the distance, right? Like, can you manage the expectations? Are you going to get the big head? Are you going to stay grounded? Because time and time, again, we've seen that happen to teams.
I would agree. Ole Miss gets LSU at home. They'll have to play A&M. A&M, the verdict's still out on A&M. I think they have a great team. Or I think they have a pretty good team. Are they great? We don't know yet. I know they got a front four that's really good. But Ole Miss, it sets up perfect for Ole Miss. They played their toughest game at Alabama and came out of there with a win. Now they get LSU at home. I mean, it sets up perfect. If they can stay healthy, if Kelly can stay healthy, and they, like I said, they don't have a lot of depth. If they can stay healthy, then they're going to be force to be reckoned with, and I think whoever comes out of the West is going to win the SEC and get a chance at the BCS game. So it's going to be fun to see. Hugh Freeze, a wonderful guy. I enjoy listening to him talk after the game. He's such a solid character, and so I was excited for Ole Miss a little bit to see them respond the way they did on the road, and so the sky's the limit for Kelly and the Ole Miss Rebels.
Josh, as I covered that game, I like scribbled down a couple of things in my notebook, and it was like heartbreak, comeback kid, momentum, history, pageantry, underdog, expectations, like all these adjectives, a crazy momentum, swinging momentum. It was like all these crazy adjectives to describe one game. To me, I've covered a lot of games in my time across the country, national championships, playoff games, bowl games, some great ones. And to me, that was in terms of from beginning to end, momentum switch, physical talent, defensive stands right there. Alabama in the fourth quarter there where they had the 3 and out. I mean, just an absolute physical, beautiful game. And I think that's why we watch football for a game like that.
Yeah, for sure. From the get-go, Alabama fumbles the kickoff return. It was like, whoa, we're in for an awesome night. That just kind of set the tone. It was horrible for Alabama for a turnover to happen right out the gate, and for your offense not to have a chance to get on the field. But we all knew that this was going to be a for real game because Ole Miss put points on the board right out of the gate, and they had the ball in the second half to start the second half, and that's a huge momentum turn. I mean, Alabama had 5 turnovers, Ole Miss had 0, and when you have 5 turnovers, the percentages of you trying to win a ball game with 5 turnovers are little to none. So, Ole Miss was going to have a real chance to win that game having 5 turnovers. That's crazy.
All right, Josh Booty, final thoughts for this early week podcast. We're going to come back for you guys next Thursday and preview some of the games and our thoughts then. But final thoughts on this past weekend of football, or even the news today that Shaun White is named the Auburn quarterback for this game, for the Mississippi State game.
Yeah, for this game. I am enjoying the first 3 weeks. There's no doubt about it. This football season has been fun. There's been teams to go down. South Carolina, Arkansas, and Auburn look a whole lot worse than we ever thought they would. Alabama's now got 1 loss under their belt. We didn't think that would probably happen until maybe late in the year, or it might not even happen at all. We thought maybe they were the strongest team in our conference. Ole Miss, now we know that the season sets up for them. LSU looks stronger than I ever thought they would.
Me too.
Fournette looks as strong as any football player I've seen in the last 10 years come out of college football. The guy's an absolute animal. I think if LSU continues to run the ball like that, they're going to be able to set the tone on everybody they play, and they go to Alabama too. So watching LSU and seeing them, what they've been able to do, watching Mark Richt and Schottenheimer work with Grayson Lambert and get him to where he's at right now as a quarterback with confidence, completing every ball that he's throwing. It's crazy to see that Georgia's this good now. We knew they were going to have a run game with Chubb, but now they've added the pass game, so they're a balanced team. So I think we've got 4 or 5 teams here at the top that can play with anybody in the country, and they might all beat up on each other. So it's going to be a fun rest of the season. Yes,
it is. And if it's been as wild as it has been thus far, just buckle your seatbelts, because we're in for a wacky ride. And as I said on Sunday night, it bears repeating. Enjoy it, DVR it, talk smack, talk to the people in your office, whatever it is, because it's gonna come and go before we know it. This awesome, amazing football season that we wait for every year. He's Josh Booty. I'm Rachel Baribeau. We will be back on Thursday for more Booty and Baribeau, and we'll be talking about the games coming up. All right, have a great day.